Right now, someone you love might be standing 2 feet away from you, completely silent, and you have no idea that inside their head 100 sentences are screaming to get out and not one of them can find the door. On the outside, it looks like they've shut you out completely. No tears, no raised voice, just silence. Maybe they're staring at the floor. Maybe they've already walked into another room and closed the door behind them. And in that moment, you tell yourself a story about what that silence means. That they don't care anymore. That they're punishing you on purpose. That they've already checked out of this conversation, maybe even this relationship. You start scanning their face for clues, and you find nothing, which somehow feels worse than if they'd screamed. You're wrong. And once you understand why, you will never look at silence the same way again. In this video, we're going deep into the psychology of people who go quiet when they're hurt. Not the surface level, their avoidant explanation you've heard 100 times, the one that makes it sound like a personality flaw or a lazy excuse. We're looking at what's actually happening inside their nervous system in that exact moment, why some people are built this way, and how to reach someone who's gone quiet without breaking the very thing you're trying to save. Let's start with the lie almost everyone believes. We think silence is a decision. We picture the quiet person sitting there, calmly weighing their options, choosing not to speak, almost like they're punishing us on purpose. So we treat it like a behavior problem instead of what it actually is. We push. We demand. We ask, why won't you just talk to me, like it's a simple request, like flipping a switch they're refusing to flip. But here's something researchers who study conflict have actually measured in real couples, not just theorized about. When a person goes quiet during an argument, their heart rate can spike past 100 beats per minute, almost like they're running, even though they're standing perfectly still. Their body floods with cortisol and adrenaline, the same chemicals that flood your system in a near-car accident, the kind of moment where your body reacts before your brain even catches up. Psychologist John Gottman, who spent decades studying why couples break up, called this state flooding. He found it in lab after lab, watching couples argue while hooked up to heart monitors. And what he found explains something the quiet person already knows in their bones but has never been able to put into words for you. Once flooding crosses a certain point, the part of the brain responsible for language, reasoning, and calm explanation goes offline. Not metaphorically. Functionally. You are not talking to someone who refuses to explain themselves. You are talking to a nervous system that just hit emergency shutdown, the same way a circuit breaker trips before a house burns down. Think about that for a second. The next time someone goes silent on you mid-conversation, what you're witnessing isn't a decision being made calmly behind their eyes. It's a safety mechanism kicking in faster than thought. So why does that breaker exist in some people and barely show up in others? It usually comes down to one of 3 places, sometimes all 3 layered on top of each other. The first is childhood. No child is born knowing how to hide pain. A toddler cries when they're hungry, screams when they're scared, reaches for someone the second something feels wrong. Expression is the default setting. But somewhere along the way, some children learn a different lesson. That crying gets mocked. That anger gets punished. That needing comfort makes the people around them tired, or cold, or distant, or simply gone for a while. Psychologist John Bowlby spent his career studying exactly this, how the way our caregivers responded to our pain quietly programs how we handle pain for the rest of our lives, decades later, in relationships that have nothing to do with childhood at all. A child who learns that showing pain leads to being shut out doesn't stop feeling pain. They just stop showing it. They learn to perform calm on the outside while something else happens underneath. They build a door, close it, and spend the next 20 years assuming that's the only way to stay safe, long after the people who taught them that lesson are no longer in the room. The second place this comes from is far more recent, and it doesn't require a difficult childhood at all. Some people learn to go quiet in a relationship that taught them, as adults, that speaking up was dangerous. If you've ever loved someone who twisted your words back at you, who made you the villain every single time you tried to explain how you felt, you already know this lesson in your body, even if you've never said it out loud. You cried, and they called it manipulation. You explained yourself calmly, and they called it playing the victim. You brought up something that hurt you, and somehow, by the end of the conversation, you were the one apologizing. Eventually your nervous system did the math on its own, without asking permission. It calculated that staying quiet was safer than trying to be understood. That isn't weakness, and it isn't dramatics. That's a survival skill, built the hard way, one conversation at a time. The third reason has nothing to do with trauma at all, and it's the one people overlook the most. Some brains are simply wired to process internally before they're able to speak out loud. There are two broad styles of communicating under stress. One kind thinks out loud. For them, talking is literally how they figure out what they feel, the words come first and the clarity follows right behind. The other kind has to go inward first. For them, being asked to respond instantly, in the middle of a high-emotion moment, feels like being handed 100 browser tabs at once and told to read every single one out loud, right now, with no time to close any of them. Their brain isn't refusing to answer you. It hasn't finished loading yet. And no amount of pressure speeds up a system that's already running at full capacity. Here's something worth sitting with for a second. If you've ever been the person who went quiet, or you've watched someone you love disappear behind their own eyes mid-argument, ask yourself honestly, which of these three is actually happening? Because how you respond to that silence depends entirely on which one it is. And this pattern doesn't only show up in romantic relationships, even though that's where we notice it the most. It shows up in friendships, when someone stops replying to texts after a disagreement instead of saying what hurt them. It shows up at work, when an employee says, "It's fine," in a meeting and then quietly starts looking for a new job. It shows up with parents and adult children, where decades of unspoken hurt sit underneath a relationship that looks polite on the surface and feels empty underneath. The mechanism is always the same. Only the relationship around it changes. Now here's the part almost nobody talks about. Silence isn't empty. It looks empty from the outside, but on the inside, it's loud, almost unbearably so. People who shut down during conflict are often replaying the entire conversation on a loop, word by word, looking for the exact moment things went wrong, like rewinding a tape over and over hoping it ends differently this time. Was it something I said? Did they mean that the way it sounded? If I open my mouth right now, will it come out wrong and make this worse? That's a mind running at full speed while the mouth stays completely frozen. Not absence. Overload. There's a second layer most people miss completely, and it might be the most important part of this entire video. A lot of quiet people aren't protecting themselves when they shut down. They're protecting you. They can feel exactly how much anger or hurt is sitting behind their teeth in that moment, and they know, with frightening clarity, that if they open their mouth right now, what comes out won't be honest. It'll be cruel, sharp, designed to wound rather than explain. So they choose the lesser damage. They stay quiet instead of saying something they'd spend the next 10 years apologizing for, something that can't be unsaid once it's out in the air between you. Which brings us to the part of this pattern that quietly destroys more relationships than any single argument ever could. The chase. You've probably lived this, even if you've never had a name for it. One person goes quiet. The other follows them from room to room, asking, "Why won't you just talk to me?" calling the silence disrespectful, demanding a response right now, in this exact moment. Picture it for a second. One person standing outside a closed door saying, "You're being so immature right now, just talk to me." And on the other side of that door, a person whose heart is already racing past 100 beats a minute, who isn't being immature at all, who is simply incapable, in that specific second, of turning the storm in their chest into a sentence that makes sense. It feels reasonable in the moment. It feels like you're just trying to fix things, like persistence is love, like enough pressure will finally crack the silence open into honesty. But to a nervous system already in shutdown, every one of those demands lands like another threat stacked on top of the first one. It doesn't pull them back into the conversation. It pushes them further out of it, deeper into the freeze. And here's the cruel irony. If you push hard enough, they'll eventually say something. But it's usually not the truth. It's just whatever sentence will make the pressure stop, the fastest possible exit from a conversation that's become unbearable. That's not a breakthrough. That's an escape route disguised as one, and it usually leaves both people feeling worse than before the silence even started. If you've ever been the one doing the chasing, sit with this for a second. Were you actually trying to fix the moment? Or were you trying to fix your own fear of losing them, using volume and pressure because the silence itself felt unbearable to sit inside of? Because those are two very different things, and only one of them actually helps. Now, it's worth being honest about the other side of this too, because silence isn't automatically healthy just because it's protective. There's a real difference between a freeze response that needs 20 minutes to pass, and a pattern of silence that's lasted years, where someone uses it to avoid every hard conversation indefinitely, where "I need space" has quietly become "I never have to engage with this." If the silence always returns and never resolves into honesty later, that's not a nervous system protecting the relationship anymore. That's a wall doing the opposite job. The goal was never silence forever. It was always silence long enough to come back able to speak. So what actually works, on both sides of this? If you love someone who goes quiet, the most healing thing you can offer them isn't a better argument or a more convincing reason to talk. It's space without abandonment, which is a much harder thing to offer than it sounds. Instead of chasing them down, try something like this. "I can see you need space right now, and that's okay. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be in the other room, and whenever you're ready, I'll be here to listen, without judgment, for as long as it takes." That sentence does something powerful that pressure never could. It tells their nervous system the threat is gone. And once the threat is gone, the part of their brain responsible for words slowly starts coming back online, on its own timeline, not yours. And if you're the one who goes quiet, this part is for you specifically. Your silence has never been a flaw, and it's never made you broken. It isn't coldness, and it isn't avoidance dressed up as something else. It's a nervous system doing exactly what it learned to do to survive. But there's a difference between using silence to protect yourself in a single hard moment, and letting it become a permanent wall that keeps out the people who are actually trying to stay. The first one is healthy. The second one will cost you the very connection you're trying to protect. The fix isn't forcing yourself to talk before you're ready, because that rarely produces anything true. It's leaving a small bridge behind you when you go quiet, instead of just disappearing without a word. A simple sentence like, "I need some time to process this, but I'm not leaving, give me a little while and I'll come back," does more for a relationship than any perfectly worded apology ever could. It tells the other person the door isn't locked. It's just closed for a moment, and there's a real difference between the two, even though from the outside they can look identical. People who go quiet when they're hurt are not the ones who care the least. Often, they're the ones who care so much they're terrified of saying the wrong thing and damaging something they value more than they're willing to risk. And when they finally do speak, after the storm has passed and the words have had time to load, those words tend to carry more weight, not less, because they survived a filter most people never bother to use at all. If you recognized yourself somewhere in this video, or you recognize someone you love in it, tell their story or your own in the comments below. And if this helped you see silence a little differently, share it with someone who might be standing on the other side of a closed door right now, wondering what it means, and what they're supposed to do next.
Like to learn more about human psychology? Like, comment, and share this video. Subscribe my channel now. Thank you for watching.